Hi, everyone. Happy to see all of you here in Amsterdam. Sunny weather today. Can I see anyone? I can hardly see faces, but hopefully during this talk today I'll see some hands. I'm head of product at Neon, and for years now I've been working with developers. I love working with engineers. I love it when they're productive, not just because I'm head of product and a project manager, but also because I care about my team. And it's my passion to give great tools to the engineers. At Neon, we're building a database that's designed for developer productivity and designed for developer experience that plays nicely with their workflows and with the rest of the ecosystem. That's easy to use, does not require maintenance. We've built serverless Postgres. But my talk today is about deploy previews. And I wanted to start it with just a quick product research. How many people here are using deploy previews? Deploys? Raise your hands. Previews? Anyone? Maybe a third. OK, not too bad. Hopefully, after this talk, more of you will be doing that. I'll also tell you how Neon and Vercel made it possible to get full-stack deploy previews that also include a database. For those of you who have not yet used deploy previews, I'll show you an example. We, in Neon, utterly enjoy using deploy previews. And this is a pull request that one of my teammates, Daniel, has created. So Daniel is proposing to publish this new documentation page about our Edge-compatible serverless driver. So on GitHub here, I can see the files that were changed. So he published some Markdown file changes. Maybe they load, maybe they don't. But then also you can see that Vercel picked up this change and has generated a dedicated deploy and applications instance for it. So, OK, finally it loaded. So actually, I can see the Daniel's change not just as a Markdown file diff, but I can also visit it and see how it works in how it renders with the rest of the website. OK, you'll have to believe me that it's possible. Many platforms nowadays support deploy previews. I think it all started with Git and making branching code and creating different versions of code really easy. GitHub and GitLab and the calm of the cloud and cloud services allowed to notify many other services about what developers are doing with their code. And now tools such as Vercel pick up the code changes that developers push, build them, deploy them. That's just what is already available nowadays. But what if your database, your application has a database? In the documentation page of one of the developer platforms I read, please be sure that any database changes are backwards compatible, because both the active applications and the preview will use the newly created migrated database. What? Sorry? Like, if I have this bad preview that was not properly tested yet, would it use the same database as my prod? For sure, that's not what I want. Well, perhaps I can have a separate database for production. But then all of my previews, would they sit still on top of the same database? That's just staging in disguise. We don't want that. We don't want different developers and engineers and features affecting each other and breaking each other. So in fact, what we want is a database for each preview. Moreover, a database for each developer environment. And perhaps, occasionally, at least, we also want to get fresh data into that database. I actually know a team who's built copying the database from prod into their previews and devs into their CI workflows. And that is just a maintenance nightmare. Too many databases, too long to wait to create them, too many things can break. It's also costly. What if the database can speak the same language as our code? What if there was branching for databases? What if it was also cheap and quick and would not create a full copy of data? At Neon, we've implemented serverless Postgres, a Postgres that can do branching. We've separated storage and compute and gave every branch a dedicated compute. Branches are very practical. They can help you recover lost data. So Praveen here deleted some data from prod. And what he did later is he just created a new branch from a point in time in the past. And that branch contained the data he's lost. So he was able to recover it. Neon branching is just like Git branching, but for data. Neon branches are branches for data, not just schema. They're also copy and write. And what it means is that as your database grows and becomes bigger, to create a branch, you don't need to copy around a lot of the data. Branches are also isolated. I mentioned that we've given each branch a dedicated compute. So you can run your performance test on some branches without touching development branches, preview branches, production branches. In fact, you can give branches to every one of your devs, to every PR, to every test execution even. Branches are super easy and quick to create with a matter of click of a button, with just a simple API call. We'll give you CLI too. But starting today, the most optimized, streamlined way of using Neon branching is with Vercel. So just now, before this talk started, our integration was published on Vercel, and what this integration does, it listens to Vercel notifications, it picks up the events about the new branches and PRs created by you in Git, and then it creates a database branch for each of your Git branches. It populates back to Vercel the environment variables with the connection strings of the newly created branches. So it all happens behind the scenes for you without any extra effort, without copying around those database dumps. But let me show you this in action. In this demo, I'll walk you through a simple app that I've created for this event. This app uses Next.js. It also uses Prisma. It uses Vercel. But for now, in the very beginning, it's using just some other hosted Postgres. So I'll start with, my app is just a simple app with some nature photography here. There are photos. The photos are grouped into topics, and each photo has an author. So I can see my own photos and then the list of topics here. As I mentioned, this app is already backed by a Postgres database. So in my Vercel config, I have the database URLs configured for database and the shadow database URL that is to play nicely with Prisma migrations. And migrations are actually part of my my build step. So in my app configuration in Git, as part of my package.json, I run in build step. I run the Prisma migrations and generate the migrations and apply them while building the app. So in order to port my app to Neon, I start with simply creating a Neon project, signing up with GitHub. Sorry. Signing up with GitHub. Oh, let's see. Let's try it again. Signing up with GitHub, checking real quick my onboarding flow here, and creating my first project. Neon, you can start Neon projects in different regions. And for the purpose of this presentation, as we're all in Europe, in Amsterdam here, I've selected a closest region to create a project. Done. Like my database was already provisioned by this time. All right, the next thing I want to do here is create databases and users inside my Neon project. I'll need that because I really want to import my existing data from my previous database dump, and I want the permissions over the tables and other objects in my database dump to match and import nicely to Neon. So I'm creating the database, but also I'll create another database called Shadow, again, for Prisma migrations to be able to detect schema drifts and to track my migrations. OK, finally, I'm ready for the step of importing data to Neon. So I pg dump from my old connection string and import it right away into the connection string that points at Neon. Voila, my data is in. I'll also check out if data got through in the Neon UI, where via tables I can check the 3 tables I have there: snaps, topics, and users, and they all have the data I had in my previous production setup. Another prep step that I need to take is to edit the old environment variables. So my project was already connected to Vercel. It already had the database URL and shadow database URL. And I want to free up those names so that Neon can populate them as the next step. Perfect. Now I'm ready to actually install the Neon integration. And when I was recording it a couple of days back, integration was still undergoing the approval from Vercel. But as I mentioned, as of today, it's available to anyone. You can discover it on Marketplace. So I authorize Neon to act on my behalf in Vercel. I select the Vercel project, and another nice thing that Neon does for me, it also creates a dedicated branch for my development environment. So right away, I'm fully plugged in. I can just start and go and start the development. Perfect. Let's see what do we have in the project settings in Vercel. So Neon has created those new environment variables. There's actually a number of them. So depending on the application framework that you're using, you could be using the database URL or a number of PG variables. And you can also see in Neon that this dev branch was created for my development environment. Finally, tiny one more step that I need again in order to keep Prisma happy. I need to configure a shadow database URL again because I just moved to Neon and I need to populate it here too. Now I'm ready to start developing locally. Let's check. My environment variables locally were still old, so I want to pull the new environment variables from Vercel. I got them going, and now my app is running locally. Nice. So localhost shows me the same app with the same data because development branch started, well, from production database, so it gets the same data I had in prod. Making changes locally, I'll actually do that behind the scenes, so I just slowly creating the new branch for the purpose of this presentation. And the change that I'll be applying here is I'll be adding one more table to my database schema. I want to connect the users to the topics that they participated in. I just need to make some code changes for it. Specifically, the code changes I'll be making are with some UI changes to start showing those new connections between users and topics, but also I need to modify my Prisma schema. So in the div here, you can see me uncommenting some stuff that I got ready before this presentation. The next step, generate the migrations with Prisma Migrate, because I wanna evolve my app. I want to evolve its schema. Migrations generated. Nice. Behind the scenes, I've actually also decided to seed the data into the newly created tables. I already had authors for my photos, so I thought that, well, this is a nice way for me to seed the users into the topics. If the users already had made photos in the topics, then perhaps they are topic participants too. Finally, ready to commit changes to GitHub because the local app seems to be working. There are some changes in the UI. Some photos are black and white now. That means that I am not participating in those topics. And there are also tiny new icons with people's faces on the main page in the list of topics. So these are the changes I've made in the code, but also the data that I've seeded into the database. And I'm ready to commit and push them. Just 3 files changed. Let's inspect the changes again, just in case. So finally, committing and getting ready to push. Now, at this point, GitHub picks up my changes. And what will happen next is that Vercel will pick up these changes from GitHub. Let's see. So my new branch called Add User Topics is populated into GitHub. I see it with a fresh commit pushed just now. I see this nice green check telling me that Vercel kicked up the deploy preview. I also see in the list of the branches in Neon that I have a new branch called the same name, Add User Topics. And finally, in the settings in Vercel under environment variables, I see the new PG host and new database URL configured and populated, but they are specific to add user topics Git branch. So we've just created a database branch dedicated to my Git branch that gets a dedicated preview deploy on Vercel. And because Prisma ran my migrations, and because I've included some seed data into my file, the newly deployed version already has those new nice avatars of the people who have the topics. And simultaneously, we can see that on production, there are new avatars for the topics. And on my new deploy preview, I have the nice commenting functionality from Vercel. That's it. Hopefully, you learned a lot about deploy previews today, about Vercel, Postgres, Neon, perhaps even Prisma. Now you know how to get full stack deploy previews, how to make use of them in your daily job. Today, we're launching Neon Vercel integration. That's launching in beta today, so please give us feedback. Tell us about your corner cases, your specific environment variables that you want us to populate. Yeah, and try it out. The QR code leads to the integration page.